In this Warhammer Age of Sigmar video, I'm going to be chatting about why fans of the Ogor Mawtribes should be getting excited and hungry, what specifically we're expecting to see in Nurgle's magnificent new wave, including a boxed game, something big for Sons of Behemat, and I'll touch upon a rumour sharer giving Age of Sigmar rumour discourse a big shake-up, and can they be trusted? Hello, I'm Hobby Jackal, this is Rumour, my semi-regular fantasy-focused Warhammer rumour series, with a great track record at this point due to avoiding rumours which are a bit wonky. This video is split into 3 parts: more Ogors, magnificent Nurgle specifics, and Daughters of Behemat. I've slapped these down below as chapters for your ease, but first a little context on the weird stuff that's going on in the Age of Sigmar rumour sphere at the moment. And as ever, thank you to the Hobby Jackal community and the fantastic folks over on TGA for nudging all this content out of the gate. The Warhammer Age of Sigmar rumour community is shooketh, or rather it's talking about rumours again with gusto rather than arguing about how naked a fire slayer should actually be, although notably that conversation is still happening. There's 2 rumour sharers in particular at the centre of this video, and knowing who they are and what their jam is will help you decide how much credence you want to give each section of this video. But rest assured, I only share the rumours that I feel have a really good chance of materialising unless I explicitly state otherwise. The first rumourer is Whitefang and staple of this video series. Whitefang pops up on the TGA forums leaving short and cryptic messages and reacting to speculative posts with emojis where they align or misalign with what he or she knows. I've not seen a Whitefang rumour over the last couple of years not at least be mostly accurate, and those inaccuracies often appear to be how we've interpreted the fairly cryptic nature of what Whitefang's suggesting. In short, we like a Whitefang rumour. The second is the new kid on the block, Boole, henceforth pronounced Boole, because it sounds fancier. They hit the rumour scene on the TGA on the 2nd of April 2024, pretty accurately stating the Skaven half of the Skaven Tide box contents. Boole then reappeared exactly 17 months later, sharing a detailed list of an upcoming Ogor Mawtribes release. Then Maggotkin of Nurgle, then a whole lot else, loads of stuff. To the extent that I'm going to have to do a whole nother follow-up video just to chart through all this stuff that's still happening. Notably, and I'm just going to have to apologise for the lighting being weird because the sun's shining in the UK, which happens every time I try to shoot a video. The remarkably detailed Ogor Mawtribes rumours were liked by Whitefang. This means, yes, I agree with this stuff, which is impressive for an incredibly detailed post, suggesting that Boole didn't just stumble upon the Skaven Tide box 17 months earlier, but actually knows stuff. Hence my deciding to share their rumours in the first place. So apparently the future's bloody bright for the Ogor Mawtribes, with them getting a Flesh Eater Courts or maybe even Skaven-style revamp. Rumour sharer Boole shared the following detailed breakdown, which was subsequently concurred by Whitefang, the most reliable of rumourers. So I've pulled apart his posts and switched the order a little bit for my own sanity here, so here's the core stuff we're expecting to see. So new hunters, notably plural, and I hope they will include Frost Sabers, formerly known as Saber Tusks. Notably, the plural may have been accidental, and we already have the Bloodpout Hunter character, as well as Icebrow Hunters and Hrothgorn from Underworlds to give us an idea of what these might look like. Notably, the Icebrow Hunter and much of what we're going to be describing as being replaced was released for Warhammer Fantasy Battles way back in 2005. We're going to be getting new Butchers, again plural, also released in 2005, also resin. New Ogre Gluttons and Iron Guts, released in 2005 in plastic. They had multiple build options, essentially throwing different sprues in to make either the Iron Guts or the Gluttons. Also the Lead Belchers, which we'll touch on again in a bit. There's going to be new Mournfangs, which, having picked up Ogre Kingdoms when they first released, still feel like a new kit to me. They were in fact released for Warhammer Fantasy Battles back in 2011, at the same time as the Big Griblies, which I love. I never quite warmed to these sculpts, so look forward to seeing their revamp. And finally we're getting a new Tyrant, another new Tyrant, given the last plastic version was released in only 2019. This suggests to me either a new look or potentially a bit of a rescale. Presumably, and I'll touch on this a little bit more later, the look isn't going to change too much because Warhammer Community have released a full color Rumour engine of a gut plate, which looks near identical to the kind of thing we'd see in the range at the moment. But due to some other things Boole said, I'm inclined to think that some of the lore around the ogres from Warhammer Fantasy Battles days is going to seep through, and generally speaking, a tyrant would be big and jowly. The biggest of the ogres eat a lot, and that is a status thing, so I do wonder if they may be going that route with the tyrant. So I touched on lead belchers. They are notably not on this list and specifically called out as one of the kits that is going to be retired by this refresh. It's a shame, as I'm quite fond of them, but Whitefang concurs with another somewhat cryptic statement by saying time to reject modernity in terms of the look of the ogres going forward. So perhaps in the age of Sigmar, the ogres don't really hang out or eat communities of cannon-toting peoples. This could also potentially suggest why the 2019 tyrant isn't sticking around, because they've got a pistol on their belt. So alongside lead belchers, Boole specifically calls out the following kits to be retired. The Icebrow Hunter, which isn't surprising given we've been told there's going to be a new Hunter's kit. Notably, the Bloodpelt Hunter is not being retired, suggesting these smaller noggined proportions may carry across the entire range going forward. Frost Sabers are going, but I do wonder if something like that might be bundled into the Hunters. The Firebelly is going. Now this is a resin kit, so not particularly shocking. Additionally, it was always a bit of an odd one, harkening back to a different cultural aspect of the ogres. It was released in 2011 and we've never seen anything relating to this side of them since. Additionally, there's the Icefall Yetis resin kits, not updated since the original 2005 release, but now living really happily on the football pitches of Blood Bowl. Finally, we've got the Great Moorpot being retired. Now this one is a bit surprising because along with the Tyrant, this was released in 2019. However, there might be a named character usurping its purpose. Boole also mentions 3 unique hero characters. The first of which I'll touch on is a unique butcher that's specifically termed a war machine. This will presumably replace the Slaughtermaster miniature, which drags along a Moorpot. Now this is complete speculation on my part, but butchers have always traditionally loved a good old cook-off. The next character is a unique tyrant, specifically called out as Glob Glittermoor's daughter, and they're also described as a monster. For the uninitiated, Glob Glittermoor is the over-tyrant of the Meat Fist Mawtribe. Under his rule, the Meat Fist have become rich and powerful by hiring themselves out as mercenaries across the mortal realms. He's rumoured to be absolutely massive. Even by ogre standards, nearly as big as a gargant, wrestles them for fun, and he replaced many of his teeth with pure realmstone, hence the nickname, Glittermoor. He's also intelligent and mercurial, leaning into the mercenary aspect of ogres of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. His daughter isn't mentioned at all, but again, harking back to those old tomes, I wouldn't be shocked to find out she's maybe killed and eaten him, which could lead into her appearing on the battlefields of the Age of Sigmar. If she did eat her dad to climb the ranks, that's dedication. And if you've got even half that hunger for juicy Warhammer rumours, you can like and subscribe for more. Cannibalism not necessary. That's cheesy, I'm sorry. So Whitefang, in a different discussion prior to these rumours, hinted that Glob would not be as different as you might think to Greasus Goldtooth. This was just a discussion around Warhammer Fantasy that Whitefang jumped into. Now Greasus Goldtooth was a hefty gold-tooth mercenary fella carted about on an adorable carpet of nobblers in Warhammer Fantasy Battles, which suggests at the very least that Glob, and presumably his daughter, may bear some resemblance to the corpulent Greasus. As already touched on, a respectable ogre leader should be absolutely massive after all. And that's my hope, that this miniature will be a spiritual successor to Greasus, hopefully with many an adorable nobbler companion. And I know some people aren't big fans of the nobblers, but you're wrong. Finally, the third character is a unique man-eater, specifically called out as a female war master. So man-eaters were an entertainingly characterful group of minis who in Warhammer Fantasy Battle days would go off across the Warhammer world as mercenaries, adopt their culture, fighting style, dress sense, and weapons, leading to some of my favourite miniatures released for Warhammer in all time. They remain mercenaries in Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and it'll be great to see a new one. Positively, Whitefang has hinted that they will get new miniatures, but they're not necessarily coming in this wave. Boole doesn't specifically state that the current man-eaters are leaving the range at this point, but I suspect they will because they're resin, and 2 of them were named characters from Warhammer Fantasy Battles. If there's one thing consistent that Games Workshop is doing right now, it's pulling resin miniatures from the ranges as they go through the next refresh, and this is consistent for Warhammer 40k and for Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Boole ends by suggesting we'll see more fatty things, which suggests to me there's even more to see that doesn't have a direct comparison or isn't necessarily easy to describe or single out. Boole would later provide a bit of a lore dump that would give us context for potentially some of these changes that we're seeing. This broadly suggests a schism between the Ogors, a return to worship of the Great Maw as its own entity and not the gulping god aspect of Gorkamorka. They speak of a seeker who finds the true hidden Great Maw, returns to their people declaring many things sacrilegious. The sacrilegious things are black powder weapons, scrawny city ogres, and the mercenary man-eaters, suggesting ogres should not be employed by something they should consider a meal or food. If true, it sounds great and lines up for some brilliant infighting, and I love the pullback for the traditional aspect of the Maw. With that all said and done, it leaves the following kits still in the range. Man-Eaters, as touched on previously, but they might be going. Bloodpelt Hunter, the Nobbler Scrap Launcher / Iron Blaster, and we have seen before this precedent where one kit stays in the range even though it can build two different things, so it could be the Iron Blaster's going and the Nobbler Scrap Launcher aspect will remain in the Battle Tome. We'll wait to see. The Big Griblies, the Stonehorns and the Thunder Tusks, the Maw Pit rather than the Maw Pot, and finally, most importantly, the Nobblers. Hurrah! So ending this section, Warhammer Community, following all this stuff, they did post a preview image which included 4 pictures: a classic looking ogre gutplate, a Fireslayer crotch, a Bone Reaper arm, and a Maggotkin of Nurgle shield. Speaking of which, as previously covered on this channel, Whitefang kindly let us know that we weren't just getting any kind of old release for the Maggotkin of Nurgle this edition, we were getting a magnificent release. And we also had hints of pestigors returning. They last appeared in Warhammer Fantasy Battles 6th edition in 2004, so more than 2 decades ago, and there was a suggestion that existing kits would get a revamp. I suspected this might be the Plague Bearers, bearing in mind they were released for Warhammer Fantasy Battles back in 2012, but now it turns out I might have been wrong. So here's the oodles of information provided by Boole. Notably, none of this has been explicitly liked and confirmed by Whitefang, aside from the bits I touched on just then. So a semi-pinch of salt, but it sounds pretty good. And Boole starts by stating Cities of Sigmar versus Maggotkin of Nurgle. It was unclear at this point if this was a narrative hook or a related boxed release, which would have been unusual as Versus boxes have generally been phased out aside from edition launches as starter boxes. But they would later jump into a post to state AOS, Warhammer Quest, Nurgle. Given the format of the last few, presumably the Cities of Sigmar element would be a limited number of protagonists, and as Boole describes himself as having limited knowledge of Age of Sigmar itself, looking at the fact that Cursed City featured the Caradon and Sylvaneth, it could suggest that actually there might be a little bit of a mix, not purely Cities of Sigmar there. They go on to provide a really specific list of releases, and it's unclear which of these will be associated with that supposed Warhammer Quest box. First up is Festus, described as a monster and so King huge. Now this is undoubtedly Festus the Leech Lord, a character that rocked about Warhammer Fantasy Battles, and we had a mini for 7th edition around 2012. He survived the world exploding and reappeared in Warhammer Age of Sigmar with the same great, albeit resin, miniature. So he was a former human alchemist from the Warhammer world, has a cheerful disposition and hums to himself quite happily while dishing out potions to unsuspecting enemies and allies, because it's fun. So I'm really stoked to see a giant version of him, and in my mind he'd probably be stuck on a palanquin of some kind, riding a big Gribbly, but Nurgle and Chaos, he could be the giant beastie thing himself. It's gonna be intriguing to see. Next up is a unique demon Prince of Nurgle, which is not particularly surprising. These things happen across Warhammer. Then Pestigor Shaman and Pestigors. Lovely to see a Shaman in the mix. Already expecting Pestigors due to Whitefang. It describes Blood Reavers and Blood Warriors of Nurgle, so using the Blades of Khorne range to sort of say equivalents here. Now also specifically lists the Putrid Blightking as getting a revamp, which is interesting because they were a kit that I sort of thought were fairly timeless, even though they've rocked around since Warhammer Fantasy days. Given the 3 are in the mix, this suggests there's almost like 3 stages of mortals of Nurgle, so potentially the Blightkings are getting even bigger and more elite looking. He next suggests Skull Crushers of Nurgle. This is cavalry. We've already had the beautiful version in the Harbinger of Decay with its stoic pose, which is admittedly kind of perfect. So I'm not sure if they could ever capture that same vibe again, so I'm expecting something quite different here. I was originally hoping the Plague Toads may make a reappearance in the game at some point, but I can't see how any Rumour sharer that's not totally evil could get by sharing Rumour without shouting frog at everyone. Next there's Rockgut Trogos of Nurgle, so Chaos Trolls. Now, whilst we've had Chaos Trolls for Warhammer Fantasy Battle with minis released for 6th edition and re-released for Warhammer the Old World, we also had specifically Nurgle Trolls called Bile Trolls produced for Forge World. These were released in 2011 and featured in the weighty Tamarkan book. This book is pretty dark, and notably contained the last iteration of Chaos Dwarfs, suggesting to me this book may have been rocking around on some GW staff desks fairly recently. The Bile Trolls were said to live in constant agony as their flesh sloughed off, reducing their regenerative powers compared to other trolls, but in battle this was compensated by their touch being horrifically poisonous and causing the flesh of their enemies to putrefy. Sounds like we might be seeing Bile Troggoths. Happy days, unless one of them touches you. Boole goes on to re-emphasize heavy plate armor, describing it as far thicker than Chaos Chosen, and states that there'll be more sexy heavy armor guys than those already named. Boole's word, not mine. Notably, after all this was dumped onto the internet, we received the 4-image picture from Warhammer Community, which contained a Maggotkin of Nurgle shield, which, given we know there's sort of 3 tiers of mortals, I would imagine this would be the middle one, the kind of Blood Warrior equivalent. What do you think? So Boole has suggested that the Sons of Behemat will be getting a Daughter of Behemat, or a matriarch to be precise. I'll share what they've said and then I'll unpick it. And notably, again, this has not been liked by Whitefang. So there's a chance that Boole has shared something legitimate, which has been confirmed by the Rumour community, gained our trust, and is now just being a rascal and just saying a load of stuff. I don't think it's entirely likely, but it is possible. So some amount of salt with this one, at least until we have the fairly explicit Nurgle stuff arriving or being hinted at by Warhammer Community themselves. So what did he say? Have you ever heard of the Gargants? I'm not going to carry on with that voice. Those towering, powerful giants who live in tribes. Maybe you have witnessed their giant footprints or even seen their appearance with your own eyes. But have you ever wondered where the female Gargants are? If you've read Battletome released in 2020 and Battletome released in 2022, you might have some ideas. After all, the tribes formed by these Gargants are led by older and more powerful female Gargants, the Gargant Matriarch. You might ask, why am I raising this question about these female Gargants? Well. Do you still remember this name? Renegade. So let's start with the Battletomes. I have the 2020 one, and I can only see a single mention of them in there, but they're there. The term matriarch suggests they're leading the tribes, and they're described as passing down the Gargant's oral tradition, their love of storytelling. And this is reiterated from the next one along from passages I've seen pasted online. Now, my biggest hope is that they are mega Gargant sized and have legs that will give us an alternative pose for the bottom half of the mega Gargants, so these two kits can be switched out. As creative as they've been with the posing of the mega Gargants, these organic legs set in a strict pose are somewhat restrictive when you have multiples of a model on the table, and it's trickier with the organic mega Gargants versus the mechanical knights of Warhammer 40k. A new mega-sized variant, a female Gargant with comparably chunky legs that could work across the range, would add mega variety to what we've already got. That said, my greatest expectation was for Man-Crusher Gargants to get a revamp. Now, these are also known as Stumblefoots or Ale Guzzlers or just the Warhammer Gargant, depending what time you came across this kit. It's been rocking about for a good old while now. The kit itself is bloody brilliant, but as for the megas, it's the leg posing that sort of lets it down when you want to field multiples of them, which you now do as part of the Sons of Behemat army. Cool fact from White Dwarf magazine, this was sculpted in 2006 when they used to do free-up sculptures, so they would sculpt some things 3 times bigger, and this was the biggest kit at the time, and they had to use a bin to cast it in. But that's not all. What's up with the name Renegade? So initially I just assumed, well, they're introducing a matriarch character who's a bit of a renegade. Oh, you. And let's face it, there's room in the army for another named character. And regardless of what else we conclude here, taking King Broad as an example, there is scope here that the kit could be built as a named character and a female matriarch as well. Then Check Out jumped onto the TGA forums and came up with a much better answer, which I really like. They pointed out that there was a 40k standalone boxed game called Renegade, which pitched 2 Imperial Titans, or Knights, against each other, so the 40k equivalent of a Mega Gargant. Named specifically Imperial Knights Renegade, the box contained 2 different types of Imperial Knights, some scenery and rules for playing a unique game where they duffed each other up. This suggests to me that there's good potential that the matriarch will be the same scale as a Mega Gargant, allowing you to have a box where you're pitching these 2 against each other, or failing that, there's 2 distinct builds within the matriarch kit. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching this far, and let me know what you think I've missed or misinterpreted in the comments. My next video will focus on the gazillion other tidbits dropped by Boole, or Boole, I'll probably go back to calling him Boole. And this includes a much more hopeful future for the poor Fire Slayers than was previously suspected. If you've enjoyed this video or want to catch the next one, do feel free to like and subscribe. No pressure, and have a lovely day. Cheers.